Hey, what's going on, family? Thank you for checking out this In the Word snippet. If you like what you hear in this snippet, you can tune into the full In the Word episode by clicking the link below in the description. Thank you, and remember, stay in the Word. Shalom. But after I had posted up the podcast, I really just started to think about certain situations in the scriptures when it came to God's children, where even though God was bringing them through the wilderness and through their storms, there were some things that he required of them. And unfortunately, sometimes they did not meet those requirements. So even though we know 100% that God will bring us through, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that can hinder God from bringing us through. And it's not on his end, it's on our end. And this past Monday, on the Eat Up Mondays, I talked about one of those ways that we saw the children of Israel hinder God and stop him from moving on their behalf, to the point where he says, listen, you guys aren't even going to see the land that I swore unto your fathers, which he was talking about, the land of Canaan. And one of the things I talked about that they did a lot of, when you read Exodus and Numbers, one thing we see that they did a lot of complaining. And that's what I talked about this past Monday, to really be careful not to find yourself complaining in the midst of your storm, or in the midst of your process, or in the midst of your wilderness, or in the midst of life, period. Like, we should not find ourselves complaining, especially those of us that know that God has everything under control. And one thing God said was that his servant Caleb, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, his servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him in the wilderness and how he had followed him fully, he says, him will I bring into the land whereunto he went, and his seed shall possess it. If you guys want to go back and read that, that's Numbers chapter 14, verses 20 through 24. That's what we read on Monday. But, when you're in the midst of your wilderness, when you're in the midst of the storm, there's a particular type of spirit that you have to have. And what spirit is that? We have to move in God's spirit. We have to see things how God sees things. And that's what Caleb did. He didn't see things the way everyone else saw it. And I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but, we're going to talk about that, because a lot of times when we see times like we're in now, years like we're in now, situations like we're in now, and some of you may not right now, things may be pretty well, things may not be as bad for you as it is for somebody else, but I'm sure that there was some time in your life where things were bad, where things were hard. And if you wasn't careful, you did the same thing that the children of Israel did, and that was go by what they were seeing. But I'm reminded in that Numbers chapter 14, I believe it was verse 22, there was something so key that God said to them. And he says, because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice. And that's when he went on to say, surely they shall not see the land which I swore unto their fathers. And what was so powerful about that was, think about what God said. He said, they saw my glory. They saw the miracles. They saw what I did in the midst of the wilderness. And what he's basically saying is that we get into our present situations and we know what he's done in the past. We've seen the different things that God has brought us through previously. So we know that God is a God of his word, that he stands firm on his promises. We've seen it. He's done it before. But for whatever reason, sometimes we get into a new situation, we get into a new trial, and all of a sudden it's almost like we forgot what God has done. And I'm here to encourage you guys that when you get in the midst of a storm, or when you are in the midst of a storm, you have to remember your testimony. Remember the place that God previously brought you through. Remember that trial that he previously brought you through, because you have to know that God is not going to change from that trial to this one. He is the same today, tomorrow and forevermore. So he is not going to change. So he does not expect us to change. He does not expect our mentality to change when we get into a new wilderness or a new storm and a new trial. And this year, 2020, is no different from that. So we have to remember our testimony, remember where God brought us from. But this whole Numbers 14, it stemmed from God sending out the scouts, sending out the spies to spy out the land of Canaan and to come back and report what it was that they had seen.